Alright, I haven't seen this, I haven't seen this, There's so many things I haven't seen. Hey everybody, welcome back to my 100 Years of Movie series. As you can see from the opening, I have not seen quite a bit of films. Actually, there's about 20 or 30 over there in the corner. I haven't watched a lot from this series. I've actually been meaning to watch films from 1962 to 1972 to pick my top favorite films from each of these respective years in this movie series. Luckily, I was able to see quite a bit and have good picks for each of them, but I wasn't able to pick my favorite from maybe there might be some things that I have not seen yet that might usurp that, but regardless, I'm here to talk to you today about 1962 to 1972. I'm sorry I haven't been able to do this very much lately. It's because I've been so stressed out with personal life. I also have more academic stuff going on in my life as well. There's just so many things going on, and I feel like I've been neglecting you guys, and I apologize for that. It's just, life is stressful right now. But, so let's get into this. Let's talk about 1962. I'm going to go over some honorable mentions, some picks that I've seen from the year that didn't make the cut, and then I'm going to go to my favorite pick from that respective year. Alright, so let's start off with 1962. There was actually quite a few films that I watched in 1962. The first being Carnival of Souls from 1962. I feel like I've said that a million times now. This is like a B horror movie, and it's with this woman who gets in this car accident at the very beginning, and it's pretty much this apparition going through trying to figure out what's going on in this world of hers. And it's really cool. A lot of really great practical effects. I think it was really cheap budget. It's just a really interesting film, so definitely check out Carnival of Souls. Another film that is an honorable mention that is not my pick is To Kill a Mockingbird, based on the novel with the same name with Gregory Peck. This is a great courtroom drama, deals with a lot of racism during this time period, and you just see how this town unfolds and how there's two sides to this, and this issue that is really major for maybe even like relevant to today's societal standards, and honestly, you could learn a lot from it. It's a great book and a great movie. It's a great courtroom drama. The other movie that I was not able to really say that is my favorite is Sandro. It's Akira Kurosawa's 1962 pick here. Now, I really love this movie because it's like a companion piece to Yojimbo, which actually was my favorite movie from 1961, or one of my favorite movies from 1961. I really love this movie, but it's not the same. But Toshiro Mifune comes back as pretty much the Ronin, who is the loner in these stories, and we'll talk about Fistful of Dollars and A Few Dollars More, and you know, The Good, Bad, the Ugly. We'll talk about that a little bit. But those were these two movies, Yojimbo and Sandro, were the template for those kind of films, the Sergio Leone ones. So I really love this movie. It's actually pretty comedic and also serious at the same time, so the tonal aspects are actually really well balanced. It's a great film, great storyline, I love it. So let's actually talk about my favorite movie from 1962. It's actually a Western as well. Well, that's an Eastern, and it's a Western. Anyway, and that movie is The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, John Wayne and James Stewart. I love this film quite a bit. I love how Liberty Valance is played by Lee Marvin, and I really like how he portrays this character that no one likes, everyone's scared of except for John Wayne, more or less, because they're pretty much the fastest guns in the West, or at least in that town, those two are. But John Wayne is this loner who is going to help out Jimmy Stewart, who is just this out-of-town lawyer. He's a city lawyer. He doesn't really know what the West is like, and really doesn't know how lawless all those things are. And so it's a really great film. I love the ending of this movie as well. The characters are really compelling. The action and the storyline is really cool, and you'll not see how the ending happens, but it's in the name. So we'll see exactly where we're going with that. I don't know where I'm going with this. This is my pick for 1962. Let's move on to 1963. Alright, for 1963, there was actually an honorable mention in this Hitchcock collection right here. It is, if I can get it, right here, The Birds. I really love this movie. It's actually the first Hitchcock movie I saw, I think, back in high school. I watched it in English composition class, and I think we were talking about suspense and writing suspense, so we watched this movie. I don't know. Great movie. Holds up really well today, except for some of the effects. You can see some of the wires on the birds, but underlying, though, this entire story is terrifying. The entire premise is terrifying, and if you haven't seen this movie, it's one of the more famous Hitchcock films. You definitely need to see The Birds. It's That's my honorable mention for 1963, but my pick for 1963 is actually a horror film, just not as suspenseful, and that is The Haunting. This is directed by Robert Wise. This is pretty much the template for a lot of horror movies that you can see today. A lot of the things that go on, the bumps, the creaks, the entire house or mansion is just doing all these crazy things, and the effects in this movie are just fantastic, especially for the time period, and really set position for a lot of the things going on in the future. And that's another thing that I saw with The Innocents, my pick last time when I was talking about The Innocents, and I really loved how scary these movies are. Like, The Haunting is actually a scary movie. It really is. It's still terrifying, and the action, there's not really much going on. There's a lot of tension between all the people who are in this house, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and they're just also trying to figure out familial lives, and they're trying to figure out personal matters and all that stuff. Just all this is happening at the same time. So I would highly recommend checking out my 1963 pick, The Haunting. Alright, so moving on to 1964. There's actually two movies that I want to talk about. The first in my honorable mention is the first in the Sergio Leone Man with No Name trilogy, even though he has different names in each one of them, yada yada yada. A Fistful of Dollars. This Clint Eastwood movie is really, really great. It's a great Western. It set a different bar for the types of Westerns that are going to come, the spaghetti Western. And it is different from the kind of John Wayne era of Westerns, and I really love this movie. But it wasn't my pick, because this is pretty much a hash-for-hash remake of Yojimbo. But my pick for 1964 is actually a Stanley Kubrick film, Dr. Strangelove, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This movie is a black comedy based on a book that is not a black comedy. It's a serious matter about USSR and USA relations during the Cold War. It's this nuclear proliferation. Who's going to pull the trigger? Who's going to bomb each other? But in this one, Peter Sellers plays two characters. One of he's like a general, and he's also Dr. Strangelove, this comically over-the-top villain who is at this war council in the Situation Room, about to, they're like, we should push the button, and bomb Russia. And the ending is crazy, and I highly recommend you checking this out. I'm not going to talk too much more about it because it's an experience, and it's a really great one. But I really love Stanley Kubrick, and I also just really love Dr. Strangelove. It's one of my favorite Kubrick films. And I actually, the ending, it switches a little bit. It switches scenes because you're mostly in the control room the whole time. And then you get to an Air Force base, I want to say, an Army base. It's really, really great. It's really just something I think deserves to be watched. So definitely check out Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Alright, so let's talk about 1965. There's a couple picks that I did not choose. This Roman Polanski, pretty much the first international film that he made, Repulsion. And this movie I watched during a really bad time in my life, so I didn't really like it as much as I probably could and should. But there's a lot of psychological things going on in this movie, and obviously it paralleled with my own life for a second, and so that's probably why I didn't like it as much. But I'm going to revisit this sometime soon. This is a really great film, really crazy movie. Definitely go watch it. I'm not going to talk too much about it. The second is, another honorable mention, is the second in that Man with No Name trilogy from Sergio Leone, For a Few Dollars More. This is another good, great Clint Eastwood film, more or less following the same lines of the Sandro Yojimbo line, where this guy comes in town and just deals with all these things going on, this lawlessness, and it's really gritty. I love it. But actually, my pick for 1965 is a film that I didn't see coming because I only saw it a few months ago, actually, for the first time, and I don't like musicals, and that is The Sound of Music. This is my pick. I really love this movie. I thought the soundtrack was really great. I always thought it was cheesy, and when I heard bits and pieces of it from my childhood, I remember everyone knows about The Sound of Music. I mean, you've heard bits and pieces of it, or if you've seen it, I'm sure you have. But this great movie, kind of during World War II, right before it and after, during the Nazi occupation, it's in the Alps, in the Swiss Alps, I believe, and there's just a lot of pretty much escapism in this movie and from the real world, and I really like that parallels with like the bright and shininess of it, and it's a great musical. And I'm not the biggest fan of musicals. I think I would rather watch musicals from the past than the modern ones. But I really love The Sound of Music. It's my pick for 1965. I thought it was really, really wonderful, and it put a big smile on my face. It's really long, though, so there's that. So that's my pick for 1965. Let's move on to 1966. Alright, for 1966, this was one of the hardest years for me to pick a film. And I'm actually going to talk about 3 of them, that 2 of them didn't make the cut, and the first one being The Sword of Doom. I really loved Akamoto's movie. This is also starring Toshiro Mifune. He's actually briefly in it, not as much as Tetsuya Nakadai, who is the main guy in this movie. I think I've talked about Sword of Doom in one of my videos for just a brief second. I really love this movie. It was crazy. It's a crazy film. And it's just a sadistic film. So definitely check out this Japanese film. It's really, really good and crazy. The second movie that did not make the cut, and I apologize to Clint Eastwood and Sergio Leone, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. This is the best of the 3, for sure. And it's the most iconic. And it's just, I mean, the name, you hear that a lot. You hear that phrase a lot. The Good, and the Bad, and the Ugly, which is really crazy. I don't know if that caught on after this cultural movement of this movie, but, you know, I don't know. This movie's amazing. You see pretty much 3 guys who are not so great. 2 of them, obviously, and then him, but he's not even that great, you know, like good. He's just as good, I guess. I don't know. It ends in a really, really cool way. There's amazing shots in this movie. A lot of stuff that I could see Star Wars eventually copying and other films as well. And I love this trilogy, and I need to get more into spaghetti westerns. So it wasn't The Good and Bad, the Ugly, I'm sorry. But the movie I picked was Ingmar Bergman's Persona. And this is a really great kind of box set. I'm going to replace this box set soon when I get that Ingmar Bergman set. I cannot wait for that. I don't know if I'm going to replace this or not, but we'll see. Persona is an in-depth look at... I don't really want to talk too much about it because I feel like you need to experience it. But this woman meets another woman because she's having some problems, and this other woman is a nurse who is helping her with these psychological issues, and the main woman who's having psychological issues is talking to this nurse, but the nurse never really responds, and there's a lot of really great dialogue just with one person, more or less, and there's a lot of great cinematography, a lot of great acting, a lot of non-verbal acting in this film as well. It's one of those art house films that's really, really well done, and really I can see why this is probably Ingmar Bergman's like opus, magnum opus. This or Seventh Seal, or Fanny and Alexander. I cannot wait to watch all of these films, the 39 that I have to watch when that comes out. But this movie is definitely peak Ingmar Bergman, right near the middle of his career. And this movie is fantastic, and the ending is crazy, and yeah. I'm not going to talk too much more about Persona because you need to watch it. This is my pick for 1966. I loved it. I loved every second of it. It's so compelling you will not look away from the screen. It makes your eyes glued to it. So let's actually go from there to 1967, where there was actually a lot of films to choose from, but I did not. The first one being the Jungle Book. I love this movie. It's one of my classic movies. In fact, I think out of all the movies I have here, it's the one I've probably seen the most, and I remember it from my childhood. I love The Jungle Book. This movie is amazing. The Bare Necessities song, you know, ooh-ee, why can't I think of the King Louie song? It's going to come to me, but, you know, regardless, this movie's great, but I did not pick it for my favorite from that year. The second movie I actually talked about earlier when I did the weekend 3-pack. I'm actually going to do a weekend 6-pack coming up soon. Maybe a 9-pack, because it's been 2 weeks. But The Weekend, this is Jean-Luc Godard's A Weekend. This is a crazy film. I talked about it enough, though, but like it's a nut film, and one of the most art house films I've ever seen, but I own, too. So, that was another honorable mention. My third honorable mention is actually Bonnie and Clyde, Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty. This is a great film. Hollywoodized for sure, because, you know, it's the 60s and also Hollywood. The true story of Bonnie and Clyde and how they met, fell in love with each other, robbed banks, and ended up dying, you know? Great film. I really liked it a lot. And now the parts where it's really hard to pick between the two, but I did not pick The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman. I really loved this movie, and I love the weird awkwardness between the mother and daughter and this kid who's in love with the daughter, who sleeps with the mom, and like it's just a really complicated thing, and it's really great, and it's one of the most iconic movies of all time. I'm actually looking forward to getting this on Blu-ray, or on Criterion. I already have it on Blu-ray, dum-dum. Alright, so let's actually pick the movie, like, beat it, beat The Graduate, beat all these films. For 1967, I picked Cool Hand Luke. What we have here is a failure to communicate. This movie, it took me forever to watch this movie. I cannot believe that I watched it officially, I think, earlier this year for the first time. That's nuts to me. Paul Newman does this iconic role as Luke, who is on this chain gang, and more or less changes the minds of a lot of the people, the inmates in it, and as well, and just a lot of iconic scenes in this, more or less for just such a petty crime that Luke did at the beginning of the film, and he just pretty much is like, my life's not going anywhere, might as well do this. And yeah, that's why he's got that cool hand, you know. That was a lame joke. But this is definitely my pick for 1967. This movie is amazing, and I loved every second of it. And I actually think this is like the precursor to like The Green Mile and all those other prisoner movies, Shawshank Redemption, all the Stephen King stuff, I guess. But this is an amazing film. I loved every second of it, and the ending is just heartbreaking. And maybe I gave away too much, but definitely check this movie out, because it's my pick for 1967, one, and also it's really iconic, and it's a really great film. So let's actually move on from Cruel Hand Luke to 1968. 1968 also had quite a crazy year for a lot of reasons, so here's some of my honorable mentions. I'm going to go try to be as fast as possible. Steve McQueen's Bullet. This has one of the greatest chase scenes ever in a film. Another movie that is on the honorable mentions is one of my favorite films, excuse my hiccups, from Mel Brooks. I think this is his debut. This is just one of the funniest movies ever, with Gene Wilder, and you also have Dick Shawn as LSD, who's this crazy guy. I highly recommend checking that movie out. One of my favorite films of all time, the original Planet of the Apes, is not my pick, and I really love this film. But, and I actually it was one of the earliest picks, one of the movies that I've seen. I used to watch the Bond films and also the Planet of the Apes movies, so I've seen all of them. So there's other Planet of the Apes films that I'm not going to go over when I get to 1972, but pretty much Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, those are all in these time periods as well. I really love the first one. I also really like the second one. Third one's alright. And the fourth one is just where things are getting started again. It's this really weird timeline. I love it. But I really love the first movie, and it's super iconic. It's one of the best sci-fi movies I've ever seen. But speaking of sci-fi movies, and this is going to disappoint quite a bit of you, but my pick for 1968 is not 2001: A Space Odyssey. As much as I love this movie, and I need to rewatch it, and I actually really want to see that 4K restoration that Christopher Nolan did. I really want to see that. I don't know if it would be my pick because I don't watch it often. I've only seen it twice in my entire life, and it's a great film. It's one of the most iconic sci-fi movies of all time. In fact, our Alma Drafthouse here in Springfield is modeled after 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's an amazing film. It's definitely one of the best movies of all time, if not one of the best science fiction films of all time. Highly regard this as an amazing film. I loved it. I love every aspect of it. First time I watched it, I was confused, obviously. The second time, I understood a little bit more. And I don't honestly think it's an experience to watch this movie more so than understand it. And I think that's the whole point. But the movie that beat this out is actually a film that really scared the shit out of me. And that was Rosemary's Baby by Roman Polanski. This movie beat out 2001: A Space Odyssey on my own list, just personally, because I really loved this movie. I loved every aspect. For some reason, I've realized my favorite horror movies are like The Exorcist, The Witch, Mother, if that's really a horror movie. I guess it kind of is. But all of them happen to do with the devil and biblical things. Hereditary this year was amazing. I loved it. But it has crazy stuff to do with demons and devils and all that stuff. And this movie is one of the originators of that. Because, I mean, you'll just have to watch it. But if you haven't seen this movie, you're in for a treat. The opening pan of the city in England, in this flat, is just really scary because you just hear the la 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 la. Anyway, I've talked about this movie before. Actually, I have a video back in my October series. I actually talked about Rosemary's Baby and how much I love this movie. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but this is definitely my favorite movie from 1968. It's a movie that really sticks with you and really scares the shit out of you because this is supernatural and very much surreal and real at the same time. It's a really strange film. I really love it. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and I actually have only seen it once, and I still remember almost every aspect of the film. Highly recommend checking out Rosemary's Baby. I also recommend checking out my October series review of it as well. It's really fun. It's one of my kind of midway videos. But that's for 1968. So let's actually talk about the 1969, the last year for the 60s. There's actually two films that are pretty much butting head to head. The first one is Butch, Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, a great Western. We got Paul Newman again and Robert Redford in this great Western slash... The middle of this movie just, it really weirds me out, and I don't understand it. I guess it's the 60s, so they have to have song and dance in it a little bit. But there's a bicycle scene in this movie, and I feel like it throws the entire tone of the movie off. And I wish it wasn't there. But I really like this movie, and the ending is crazy, and you know it's a classic Western film, and you just I like it a lot. I really like the beginning and the ending, but the middle part is just that fucking bicycle scene. I don't like it. So the movie that beat it out was actually a movie that I've recently seen and actually recently bought, Midnight Cowboy. This is with Dustin Hoffman and John Voight. Can't talk. John Schlesinger directed this movie, and this is a really, really weird movie about just this broken soul, John Voight, who really doesn't know what he's doing. He's says he's from Texas, and he's doing drugs and hooking up, and it's just a lot of stuff that the underbelly of a lot of American society that you don't see, especially during this time period. I need to watch it again because I wasn't like really paying close enough attention to, I probably should have, to the film when I was watching it, and I really wish I was. But Midnight Cowboy really kept me intrigued with the storyline and the plot, the ending as well. I really love the camera angles and the acting in this as well. There's just, it's next level, and it's why it's a Criterion. It's why it's one of the best films of all time. And I know it was rated X during the time that it came out, and it was the first movie, I think, to win Best Picture or win an Oscar, an Academy Award in a category with rated X. So that's really crazy. I think it's the only one too. So this is a great film. It's a great cover as well. Yeah, I really like how it's pretty much showing you the city light of everything in Hollywood, for Hollywood movies, and for New York, the city lights that are at nighttime, and the craziness that goes down in that city. So let's actually move away from the 60s. We're going to talk a little bit about 1970, and we're going to talk about a couple of films that are on my honorable mention. The first is a film by Mel Brooks in this Mel Brooks collection. We got The 12 Chairs. This is a really, really funny film. It's actually one of my favorite Mel Brooks films, of the lesser-known Mel Brooks films. I really love 12 Chairs. I highly recommend checking out this. Get this collection. This collection's amazing. It has a lot of films that aren't available on Blu-ray on their own, and I highly recommend checking that out. The second film that was on honorable mention is Tora Tora Tora. It's the Pearl Harbor attack, but you see half of it from Japan's side and half of it from the U.S. side. And I actually like this more for a historical context. And yeah, it's Hollywoodized a little bit, but you had different directors from both Japan and the U.S. film different sides, or at least cinematographers. And it's really cool. It was really great seeing that dynamic and see where both sides were coming from. And it's more of a holistic kind of approach to understanding World War II, at least the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th towards the United States in Pearl Harbor. And so I really loved this movie. I really love a lot of these historical kind of war films. This is a really great movie. It's a long one. But it wasn't my pick for 1970. My pick for 1970 was actually the Aristocats. It's the animated movie that I picked over it. I really love this. It's just like when we were talking about The Jungle Book. This is one of the oldest films that I remember being on this list that I've seen when I was younger, and I watch it all the time. I really love that jazz scene near the end of the film, and I also just love the dogs in it, and just the relationship with like the cats, the three kitties, trying to get these two in love with each other. And I don't know, it's a great film. I really love it. I'm not a cat person, I'm a dog person, but doesn't mean I can't love movies about cats. So I really love the Aristocats. I just said the Aristocats. That's what it's making fun of. Aristocats. Because you have this nobility of this cat and her owner's nobility, and he's just a street cat, and that's where the jazz band comes in. He's like, I don't know about this, and a lot of shenanigans involved, and it's just a really simple film, and it's really fun. The animation's really great. It's a great Disney film, and I would highly recommend checking out the Aristocats. So this is my pick for 1970. But let's move on from there, from 1971. There's actually a couple of films that are really worth talking about. The first one being The French Connection. This movie is amazing. William Friedkin directed this film. You've got Gene Hackman as this guy who's just like when we were talking about a little bit earlier with Bullet with Steve McQueen. This has an amazing chase scene in it, and that's pretty much what I know it for in this crazy kind of spy thriller. And I really, really love how everything ties together in this movie. But that wasn't the pick. Another pick that is also from my childhood that I've seen a million times is the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Not Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That movie's an abomination for the most part. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Gene Wilder plays this iconic Willy Wonka. I love this movie, and it puts me in a good mood all the time. A lot of craziness in there as well. A lot of scary parts as well, especially in that tunnel. That tunnel scene scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. Still kind of freaks me out a little bit. It's very psychedelic, and I love it. But it wasn't Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It was another psychedelic type of film, directed by Stanley Kubrick, and it's Clockwork Orange. This movie is fucking nuts. And it's just about this guy going pretty much crazy. He's a schizo. He does all these psychotic things. There's a rape scene in it. That's nuts. Lots of driving really fast, drinking milk in a bar. There's a lot of vandalism and property damage, murder. All these things go on in this movie, and it's just nuts. It's just this psychological breakdown. I love this. I love this film. Clockwork Orange is also a book. I know the book is crazier, but Stanley Kubrick did a great job of making this movie more or less come to reality. And it's a very English film, and I love it. And I love those English films from the 70s and in the 60s as well. I mean, you can see that with Rosemary's Baby. I can see parts of that scenery and that type of vibe. I don't know, they have like a touch to them. I don't know, it's really great. I love Clockwork Orange. This is my pick for 1971. So let's actually move on to 1972. This is one of the biggest year in films, because I'm going to talk about the most iconic movie, one of the most iconic movies of all time. But first, I want to tell you about my honorable mention. That is Deliverance. You got John Voight as well. There he is again, and Burt Reynolds. This movie is nuts and it's really hard to watch, and I really don't like watching it that much, but I watched it for the first time this month. And yeah, there's definitely a rape scene, and squeal like a pig, and it's a crazy movie on the river with they're looking for something, and it just goes all awry, and it really goes all awry. It really does. But the movie I'm talking about earlier from my 1972 pick has to be The Godfather. This movie has been talked about a million times by a million different people. It's one of the most iconic movies of all time. Definitely, arguably, this or the part 2 is the best movie of all time, according to a lot of people. Citizen Kane up there as well. The Godfather is an amazing film, especially this performance here. Marlon Brando does such a great job as the Godfather, as the Don. You know the opening scene at that daughter's wedding. This guy is actually asking him for help, and he's like, why would you do this? On the night of my daughter's wedding, why would you come to me asking for a favor? And it's just from there you see Michael unfold. You see, this entire family lineage, especially over the three-piece movies, even the Sofia Coppola one, I want to say. The last one with Francis Ford Coppola, Godfather Part 3, the one that not everyone likes. You even see the dynamics from the 70s to 1990, this family unfold as well. There's just so many great things about this movie, with Michael and then the Don and just all, and Vincent, and just everyone in here is just an amazing film. Overall, I don't really want to talk about it too much because I feel like a lot of people have already talked about it a million times, but this movie means a lot to me, and it shows you a lot of the crime, how the crime drama kind of became a staple, and it's one of the best movies of all time. So those are my picks from 1962 to 1972. I want to hear your thoughts down below. Were my picks all right? There's a lot of things that I missed, like I see High and Low over there, I see Solaris. There's a lot of things I want to watch that I haven't seen. But I gotta move on. I gotta move on to 1973 to 1983. That'll be the next 1983, or 1973 to 1983. That's my next 100 years of movies. I'm looking forward to it. I want to hear your thoughts down below. What were your picks? Were your picks different than mine? Don't forget to like this video, give this comment, and don't forget to share it as well. And I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around. Don't forget to subscribe. That too.